Okay, so the Pequot War increased settlement in the New England region has all kinds of impacts. And one of those is from 1633 to 1634, there was a smallpox epidemic which swept through the native populations of New England. The epidemic hit the Pequots particularly hard, whose location was at the mouth of the Connecticut River, and they had pretty much allowed or had controlled trade up into the region. The Pequots were located in the middle of the Europeans, and if we look back at the map here, you can see their location. The Pequots are here. They're kind of in the middle of the Dutch at New Amsterdam. You've got the Plymouth, I mean, you've got all kinds of stuff all the way around them. You've got Massachusetts up here. Um, and they're really just, there's people all around them. As the settlers move into that Mystic River Valley of the southeastern Connecticut, the leaders there, and you're looking right here is the Mystic River, if you're looking. The settlers demanded that the Pequot pay a heavy tribute and give up several of their children as hostages. The Pequots rebuffed them, and the colonists declared war. Also, they were tied up in various relations among the tribes, as well as the British and the Dutch. The English allied with the Narragansett and the Mohican warriors, and in May 1637 attacked one of the villages there on the Mystic River. Um, they set it ablaze. They killed anyone who tried to escape. Nearly 400 Indians died, and it shocked their allies. Only 5 survived. Other Pequots were actually sold into slavery, and this is something I do want to talk about for a minute. In your week 3 discussion post, where you talked about that transition toward a racialized slavery, most of you did miss the fact that the Native Americans were used as slaves at one point. The problem was, it was very easy for them to escape. Linguistic networks allowed them to be able to communicate very freely, to be able to cause uprisings. So one of the reasons that we do see that transition toward African slaves is because they simply don't know the land. I mean, if you bring someone with, from a foreign country in, and they're not going to have those social networks, they're not going to know the lay of the land, they're not going to be able to escape as easily. And next week we'll dive in a little more to that slave trade. And we're going to look at just linguistically how hard it is from them, because they're coming from so many various places in Africa. So that's something I do want you to take note of, is that transition toward a racialized slave system doesn't go just from having indentured servants to bam, we have African slaves. There is a step there in the middle of where they do try to use Native Americans. But back to the Pequot War. The Treaty of Hartford in 1838, the English terminated Pequot sovereignty, where they had their own place. And they will actually outlaw the use of the tribal name. In the aftermath of the war, the Indians in southern New England began to reconsider their relationship with the English. The Narragansetts are absolutely unsure of whether or not they should remain allies. They even attempt to form a confederacy in the early 1640s, only to be attacked by the Mohawk warriors who were enticed by English goods. And we could see that a lot, that you could kind of prompt some of these native tribes. If you had what they wanted in trade, you could prompt them to attack if needed. Then they sought ways to remain at peace. Throughout all of this, Massasoit maintained his alliance with the English at Plymouth Colony. He continued to trade with them, but from north to south in New England, English settlements were growing and expanding. The Indian lands were under constant pressure, and land changed hands through both valid and fraudulent deeds. One of the things that we see come up are what's called praying towns. And overall, and this was something that the came out of kind of those Puritan areas, is that the Puritans did not really focus as much on converting Indians to Christianity. Um, we tend to, I think about these areas of saying, okay, they were very religious, and so they must be out, trying to convert the natives to Christianity. But on a whole, they really didn't. But that's not to say that they didn't do anything at all. John Eliot is one individual in particular who had a great deal to emphasize conversation with the natives. He translated the Bible into the Algonquin language. He thought of himself as the Indian apostle, and he focused on absorbing the Native Americans rather than eliminating them. From the 1840s onwards, many Indians increasingly were pushed to go toward praying towns, and some Indians also found safety and security in these towns. But the idea behind them was the overall elimination of the Indian way of life. And you are going to have a document that is going to be attached to this week's module. I do expect you to read it. It is about the praying towns, and in that there's going to be a map and some of those rules. And most of the rules are basically set at Americanizing, or not Americanizing, it's not America yet, but civilizing, I guess I should say, the Native Americans. Like, one of them is you cannot crunch lice in between your teeth. I mean, it's really kind of a gross one, but you think about it, if you want lice to go away, they're hard to kill, so I guess they would crunch them in between their teeth. So there's like a law about that. It talks about how the length of men's hair. There's all kinds of different things that are set out in these. If any man shall be idle for a week, he's fined 5 shillings. If any unmarried man shall lie with a young unmarried woman, he shall be fined 5 shillings a week. I mean, it's a lot of things toward that just really kind of breaks down their traditional system of living. So I do want you to take some time, make sure you read that. You may see a test question at some point in time pop up about this, so pay attention to it. So the road, this is a map of where those praying towns kind of popped up around 1674-ish. All the kind of T symbols are the praying towns. You can see, and they were pretty widespread across the Massachusetts region, clear down into Connecticut. So they do some of that. And here's just kind of some of those rules that we talked about, but you will have that reading that you can do also. But the road to, let's talk about the road to King Philip's War. So you have a couple different things going on. You have in some regions where they do try to civilize. And I apologize. I think I said Americanize again the other night, guys. It has been a really long day today. I apologize. I was gone for approximately 10 hours for my uncle's funeral. So my apologies that this is happening so late and I'm kind of all over the place. But so you've got some basic civilizing going on with the praying towns. You've got the Pequot Wars, but King Philip's War is going to be the big one. So the relation between the Wampanoags and the English took a turn for the worse after the death of Massasoit in 1661. Now remember, he'd still been able to kind of keep a good relationship with them because of trade. His son, Wamsutta, he died in 1662, so he only lives a year after his dad. And then the younger son, by the name of Metacom, becomes the main chief in the region, or of that tribe. The English continue to move onto their lands, and then they begin to assert their jurisdiction. Indian hunters find themselves arrested and jailed for trespassing on lands that the English now claimed as their own. Now, keeping in mind, for the natives, they own those lands in joint ownership. So this is it's a real big misunderstanding here. By 1671, the English leaders at Plymouth demanded that the Wampanoags hand over all their weapons. Metacom had come to the determination that he simply would not sit to the side while the English took over the entire country. And in December 1674, a Wampanoag man named John Sassamon reported to Plymouth Governor John Winslow that Metacom was preparing for war. In January of 1675, Sassamon was found dead under the ice of a pond with a broken neck. So basically, think about this: you have a Wampanoag who is basically running back and forth. He's a traitor. I mean, in all essence of the word, he's a traitor to his native tribe. So he was found dead under an ice of, a pond that was covered in ice, had a broken neck. And the problem with this is who takes charge of this problem. So in June of 1675, Plymouth colonists seized, tried, and executed 3 Wampanoags for the death of Sassamon. And the Wampanoags react to this pretty strongly. I mean, they viewed as this was an assault on their sovereignty, because they do have their own nation. The fact that 3 of their people were tried under an English system was wrong. So they put together a multi-tribal coalition to attack the English. Some Indians sought refuge with the colonists because they didn't want to fight, but English paranoia meant that they really did not trust any Indian. In the late spring of 1675, the Indians struck throughout the region. Uprisings spread throughout the summer and fall. They attacked 52 of the 90 English settlements. And guys, this is something I really want you to pay close attention to, because we often think that this is that case of Godzilla coming in and just squashing all the Native Americans. No, they fought, and they fought hard to keep their lands. In the late spring of 1675, the Indians struck throughout the region. They attacked 52 of 90 English settlements. Metacom, who was also known as King Philip, was the Wampanoag Sachem. He led the attacks in the upper Connecticut Valley. The English declared war against the Indians, who sought neutrality in the case of the Narragansetts, and the English accused them of harboring the women and children of the Wampanoags. We also see the Great Swamp Fight of December 1675. The English destroyed a Narragansett stronghold and killed hundreds of men, women, and children. By the winter of 1675-1676, it was absolutely a terrible, terrible winter for all who were involved. This is a map just kind of basically of the region, showing you some of those major battles. You've got access to this PowerPoint. You can go back and look at it if you want to. But many of the English fled to the coast, and the Puritan ministers thundered from the pulpit about God's punishment for their sins. The 500 Prayingtown Indians who had been placed on Deer Island and Boston Harbor suffered from exposure this winter. The English appealed to the Mohawks, who attacked the Wampanoag winter camps. And by the spring of 1671, the Indian alliance was just faltering, and the English gained a lot more native allies. The colonists also had regrouped and had several successful attacks on Indian encampments. And finally, in August of 1676, Metacom was caught and he was killed. His head was actually placed on a stake at Plymouth. And basically as a warning to anyone who might attack them. And the English did this regularly anyways. They like to stick heads on spikes. But it left a very hostile legacy, and reminding Indians, or the remaining Indians they kind of started putting them on small reservations in praying towns. At least 3,000 Indians died and 1,000 Englands. So the narrative arc of the English-Indian relations appears to follow a similar pattern. By the end of King Philip's War, the English had secured a much firmer position in the region, and the power of the Indian peoples had really just severely been diminished. The Indians remained in the area, but they struggled to survive in the aftermath of this war. So, it's not that case of Godzilla crushes the natives. So I hope that helps some. Make sure to